So what people should know that they are not alone. People should know that they are not the only ones going through it. And once when they have the sense that how did somebody go through it? What did they deal? It's like free psychiatry, right? You're not paying somebody to go and get advice, but you're learning from somebody's stories as to how they dealt with the situation and how they solved it. So for me, storytelling, life is storytelling. Life is about how we identify as people across borders, across cultures. At the end of the day, the feelings and emotions, when I told you in an organization, it's the same. Human beings are governed by a lot of fear, uncertainty, doubt, yet they want to further their life, they want to be ambitious, they want to go. And so you bring the ecosystem as what is innate and what they want to be. There's always a conflict, disappointments happen.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It's Af Malhotra again on Straight Talk with Af. Now, of course, I say this to you every single time. I do not disappoint. I never will. Today is, again, a very different show, and this should blow your mind because I have a special guest with me. This is an individual I met in my past life, and I had brief interactions with him, enough for me to feel like he needed to be on the show today. And his way of thinking, his approach to leadership, his ability to start with something fresh and brand new and start it up and build it, to actually getting into the mix of an established business, restructuring that business, growing it, expanding it, and now moving into another dynamic space as a leader, felt to me as if, his skills, his wisdom, his traits, who he stands for, is appropriate for Straight Talk. And as you know, we care about startup mavericks, and not everyone has to be a startup, because startup is an ideology, it's a culture. And so today I'm honored to have the wonderful Rajesh Subramaniam on my show, the CEO of ResultsCX, and of course, many other accolades. So Rajesh, welcome to Straight Talk with Af. How are you?
Very well, Af. Thanks for having me on the show, and thanks for all the kind words. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a real pleasure. You've given us an hour of your time, and I need to make the most of it, of course, as I have you here. So I just want the world to know that, Rajesh is a person of multi-dimensions and different incarnations throughout your life. You've done different things in your professional life and your personal life. I met with you when you were at a company called Firstsource, and you were the CEO of this pretty cool company. And you were solving a lot of problems for listed companies, financial institutions, and various other companies related to, contact centers and help desk. And, every time someone called and had a grievance or needed an answer to a question rapidly, you had this incredible army of specialists around the world who made that happen. And of course, you were white labeled. No one ever knew this was the company. You would be called Bank X or Bank Y. And somehow you founded the company, and then you went in and out, and there's a journey there. And you have so many stories that I'm going to try and extract today. Before all of that, though, there's got to be a person that I haven't met yet. And so what do we need to know about Rajesh? What's your story? Who are you really? Where did you come from? How did you end up in this world of corporations? Please give us a bit of a whistle-stop tour so we can try and understand the bigger picture, the wider picture, and the personal story.
Sure. So I come from very humble beginnings. Was born in Chennai, grew up in Calcutta. I lost my father when I was 6 years old in an unfortunate accident, and so it's basically been my mother that's raised my sister and I as a single parent. Grew up with some very humble, modest upbringing. Mother was a school teacher, came from a very low middle class family. But surrounded by a lot of successful people. It could be my uncles, it could be my cousins, it could be, the ability to measure success fuels a certain ambition, and the ambition is to succeed and replicate what a 6-year-old believes or 8-year-old believes is success. And at that point in time, I realized that inquisitiveness, curiosity, ambition, drive. These are nice mantras and nice words people use today, but sometimes you're born with them. Sometimes a situation brings out that element in you. And I hung around with very smart people smarter than me. And again, it's a mantra today. People say you hire people smarter than you. But, from your childhood, if you've had the privilege of being exposed to an environment that fuels a certain degree of ambition to succeed, success will follow. It's the journey is as important as the result. And there have been many pivots in my life which I could have taken, but today where I am, talking to you, sitting in on the east coast of America as the CEO of ResultsCX, backed by Chris Capital, would have been the same outcome, any irrespective of whichever pivots I had taken in life, because I believe I've just been blessed with the right attributes, given some of the hard upbringings I've had early on in life. So that's a little bit about my personal background, and it's been a fun ride so far. And my mantra is very simple. I need to learn. The day I stop learning, my game is over. I could teach a lot of people a lot of things. That's because I learn. It's a continuous process. And the day the mind goes flatlines, the heart flatlines. That's what I believe.
Beautiful. And so, if I may, I just want to probe a little bit around that, because you talked about an interesting distinction between you either born with something, these traits that you've articulated, or it's circumstantial, it's situational, of course. And again, that's not given, right? So there's no linearity there. There are many other variables that come into play. What was that moment in your life, if at all, and perhaps you've done your thinking or you haven't, but I will ask, what was that moment in your life where you felt that some of these traits that you've now reeled off were you? Can you just share some either episodes or stories where, even at a younger age, when you're sort of, wet behind the ears, you've got a lot of gusto and not as much wisdom, but at least the drive, certainly. Were there any key events in your life that created those exponential moments of realization, good or bad? And by the way, often they're bad. They're not always related to success. That is far and few between.
And I think it's very simple. Success in life comes from the basic ability of wanting to be competitive. Whatever you do, you want to win. And to win, you have to do your best. You have to go outside the comfort zone of doing your best. And early on, getting into competitive sport, getting into competitions which might seem very silly, in kindergarten, 4th grade, 5th grade, 6th grade, but getting in because you want to win. If you don't have the desire that you want to win, you will never undertake the journey. That journey teaches you lessons which will help you to win, maybe not in that circumstance, but somewhere else. But there are no shortcuts in providing the effort in wanting to win. If you have to play 100 balls in 10 minutes to get that forehand right in tennis, you got to do it. You got to serve 1,000 serves. You got to do it. It's going to hurt. But when you get back to the tennis court, when you get that muscle memory going, it's going to help you. You might always run into stronger opponents, but you will have your time of the day where your skill sets come to bear. So for me, the requirement for success situations has always been what subconsciously my mother has done. She put me in things which obviously I have no ability to go and enroll into a few things, debates or quizzing or tennis. But she just she found it that this boy needed an outlet to change the circumstance in which she was raising us. And, it's never a single ingredient that cooks a meal. It's a multiplicity of things that come together. And what makes it the perfect ingredient, that stays in the DNA, that stays in the muscle memory, and that fuels success. And that's how it's been for me.
Yeah, superb. And so you had your life journey, and of course you had a trauma. You lost your father at a young age, and your sister. You're the older one, are you, or your sister the older one?
My sister is the older one.
Right. And so you had that dynamic, and of course you had your mother who took on both roles, I imagine. And whenever that was in India, I guess it was a few decades back. It would have been a different India, and so it's remarkable how a parent or parents can sense and respond to the needs of the child. And then, of course, then a large part is the child has to then develop and, like a seed, flourish and turn into a big green bright tree, which you did. And where did your career then take you? Did you fall into sort of this area of technology or services? What was your gig? What was your journey?
My journey was, I call myself a visual mathematician. I like numbers. Numbers talk to me.
Right.
For me, the old saying, in God we trust, the rest we check. So the rest we check is where the numbers add up. So for me, I've always had the privilege of working with very smart people, hanging around with very smart people. So you align intellectual capability with commonsensical principles that result in an outcome that is measurable. That's what numbers do. I mean, you see a lot of people lost in esoteric zones and they're not able to bring it down to something which is actionable. So they remain, the high intellectual quotient, but unfortunately not practicable in how you drive, life situations. So for me, it's always been numbers and early exposure to stock market investing. My mother was a sub broker, so she was dabbling in stocks.
Wow.
So when she retired as a teacher, she found that as her calling. I learned from that. I got exposed to people who were talking a language which was Greek and Latin. Then I started making sense of it as I was studying those courses eventually. And that's when the muscle memory comes back. It allows you to relate. And then everything comes back. And fundamentally, what's helped me through the journey is never believe somebody else is dumber than you. Always believe that somebody else is smarter than you. That somebody can be your driver, your watchman, can be the chairman of the board, can be the wealthiest guy in the room. You're learning something from someone all the time. Take the goodness, understand the goodness, absorb that, ignore the faults, and make sure that you get to the next level of what your own evolution is. And trust me, the last 30 years I've been working, that's exactly what I've been doing. And that's where I am today.
That's beautiful. I like the bit around ignore the faults, but focus on the goodness. I think it's a very, very important leadership lesson and lesson for all managers or aspiring leaders, because I think in the busyness of life and the busyness of the amount of information that is coming our way today, especially over the last 3 to 5 years post-COVID as well, it is very, very difficult for established, aspiring, brand new managers or leaders to really figure out which model is workable for them. And I would say to a large extent, I'm going to go down this path in terms of inner outer in a moment. I think the pedigree and the background you come from, whatever it may be, I'm not saying, privileged life is better than someone who's not been so privileged and so on and so forth. It's what you make of it. I think this is what you're essentially saying. That matters. That attitude, that mindset is really, it's common across the world. You speak to leaders all around the world, across the 8 billion people that we have. There seems to be, we don't get along in many ways, but there's some things that are consistent. One of those things is what you've just described, which is this idea of attitude and mindset, which of course, when some of us have it, everything is glass, half full. Actually. So that perspective makes a massive difference. So one of the interesting things I see about your career also is, of course, I'm touching a little bit on D&I, is that you started your career, I know you were at an organization called Walden, and you opened up the first ever branch in India. Tell us a little bit about that. And then I want to sort of segue into another area.
Yeah, no, I'll tell you a little bit of history as to how by the way, Walden was actually one of the earliest Silicon Valley venture funds that set up in India. So I restarted Walden when I rejoined them in 2008. So it was the first foray for Walden. So I had a career in investing and in corporate finance consulting. So I was doing stock market investing. I was doing mergers and acquisition advisory, valuing companies in all advisory basis. And then just before the dot-com bust, I became a venture capitalist because the time from investing to money was very easy, and became a venture capitalist for all the wrong reasons, because it was a nice place to be in and get rich quickly. Again, the 98-year-old, right? All the wrong reasons in life. But I liked the venture capital idea because I was meeting so many smart people, so many people with so many ideas. 90% of them will fail, because they have what I call supply side economics. I can build X, Y, and Z, great things, but I don't know what the market wants. I have a fair idea of the market wants, but I don't know how to execute on it. So what happened was venture capitalism intrigued me because of life is about the network. It's not what you know, but what you gather from people around you. And for me, I really love that model, but I knew I was going to be a ranked failure because I've never built a business in my life. What can I go tell somebody? I should be in private equity. If I know numbers, I should be in private equity. I should be in buyout. And none of those in 99, 2000, were evident in India. You didn't have, growth capital. You didn't have buyout. The regulations didn't allow, some of these to thrive. So that's when I joined ICICI and what became ICICI OneSource, I was the first employee of the company, built that to a successful IPO in 2007, along with the founding team as a CFO. And then I said, I have done my journey from a business plan to an IPO with 100,000 shareholders in a company. I know how businesses are built. I know the mistakes people make. You get scars to show for it. Now is the time I think I'm right to get back to the venture industry because people will respect me, not because Walden has the money to invest, but there is somebody that gives them a little more than money, which is how to build a business and how to avoid mistakes.
Right.
So that's how I went back into venture capitalism, and Walden was the platform that I restarted that with.
Right. Wow. Okay. And so you, as a leader, of course, had a tremendous amount of experience in India. So, you obviously understand the culture, you know how to build companies there and all of the wonderful things that you learn in the East. And yet you also have worked in international organizations. And now, of course, you're in the States, in the East Coast, doing something totally different. I want to sort of step back for a moment and just look at the state of the world right now. And, outside of your CEO responsibility and leadership responsibility in your professional world, as a human being, you have your radar up and you're observing like I am and like we all are. And so we have a mixed bag today. And we all know that. Of course, we're coming out of a COVID situation into this new world, economic instability, war, climate related fears, even as wild as alien landings and UFOs, depending on who you speak with. So there's a lot going on the planet in all senses. There's populism, the governance system's changing, the move away from democracy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And business leaders in the world of business, some of them have been around for a long time and continue. A good example is our friend Jamie Dimon at JPMC, who seems like he really does like that position and has been there for a very, very, very long time. And there are a few like him in the world, not many. And then, of course, there are many who are less comfortable with the frenetic nature of the world. And they're asking very important questions, like we are at Straight Talk. So one of the first questions I'd like to table with you is really sort of dual. One is related to leaders and leadership, and what sort of human-driven leadership do we really need now, given that you come from a certain generation as well, where, myself in my mid-40s, I grew up on the last 50 or 100 years of what we were taught coming out of capitalism and the management books out of MBAs, which we all know said certain things. And I grew up on that diet. Now I've changed my diet and I'm realizing it's like moving away from processed food to Ayurvedic food, right? Wow. My God, the benefits are immense. And I'm starting to see things I'd never seen before, almost in ultraviolet, right? And that realization creates an awakening of sorts. And many people are awakening, even in the corporate world. Even leaders are saying, hey, what I did 15 years ago, I think I need to change it. It's insane. So my first question to you is, as an individual, as in your professional life, but also in your personal life, what is concerning you about the world, number one, and to unpack that for a moment. And then related to that, based on what's concerning you, how do you think leaders are dealing with it? Maybe the good and the bad side. I wanted to get that perspective and spend some more time on that first.
Great. So I think what's concerning me is two things. The generations which are now coming into the workforce, or are getting ready for their first mortgage or whatever it is. There is a sense of entitlement some things that you and I wouldn't have seen, because we grew up from whatever we had. We knew it wasn't entitled. We had to earn for it. We could
Right.
come from a privileged class. You could come from a non-privileged class, but still there was, certain things didn't come easily. It had to be earned. There was a time and place for it, and that's not the other. And so I think there's a generation of people that are coming into the workforce, basis how the world is. They believe they're entitled. The second
Mhm.
thing which worries me even more is a generation of people with low self-esteem. And for me, that is extremely worrying, because that's, the mental health. Everybody talks about mental health.
Mm.
It's the next. It's always been there. It's just getting worse, because imagine, look at the exposure kids have. Earlier, social media was supposed to connect people. It was supposed to connect communities and do stuff. Right now, if somebody doesn't like somebody else's post, I'm just dumbing it down.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody doesn't get an acknowledgement, there is a lack of self-esteem.
Mm.
There's a belief that they're being ignored, and that leads to a downward cascade of a whole bunch of behaviors that has a very dangerous contagion effect. And what it was meant to be, and how business models and how capitalism has
Mm.
driven some of these requirements. Even if I don't put something on, I'm goaded, saying, "Hey, why are you silent? What's happening? Why aren't you not spending money? We have missed it." So you see what's happening.
Mm.
It's just that these couple of behaviors around low self-esteem and entitlement, for me, this can prove to be extremely destructive
Mm.
going forward. And at the end of the day, whether it was 30 years back or now, people have emotions, people have feelings. People go through the fundamental three emotions of fear, uncertainty, doubt all the time.
Mm. Mm.
How do you
Mm.
deal with those emotions? Manifests across different generations in different forms. But how do you solve for it as a leader, or as a member of a family, when you're living in a family, in a community,
Mm.
whether it's your friends, your family, your relatives, or whether it's in the boardroom, whether it's at work, it's the nuances are the same. How you deal with them is different. So for me, at this point in
Mm.
time, how do I deal with 20,000 plus people? Because at the end of the day, what they do impacts the experience with my clients. And if my clients are extremely happy with the company, my shareholders are happy. So for me, at the end of the day, the mental health of my employees, where their ambitions are, where they are in their own journey as to what they've earmarked for themselves. If I'm not able to solve, I can't solve for everybody, but if I can't provide that culture and the environment for them to thrive, my game is over. And
Mm.
that's how.
Mm. Got it. So it's a great point. It's a sense of entitlement that comes up a lot, of course, and that's and I'll give you an interesting perspective on that, because it's been debated. So one side of the coin is the sense of entitlement being the concern. When I speak to people who are on the other side of the fence, they would, of course, vehemently disagree that they have a
But
sense.
they don't know any other way. I mean, that's the only way they
Correct.
know. Yeah.
Correct, of course, because they would argue our default is this. This is our diet. You gave us this diet and we grew up on this diet, and that's all we know. Of course, because how do we put ourselves back into 25 years ago when you had it tough and you had to work hard and push trolleys or be on the checkout in the supermarket and so on. So they have their perspective, but I hear you. The second one, I do have to agree with you. It's a worrying situation with mental health and the lack of self-esteem, and of course the over and extreme dependence on being liked, actually, both senses of the word, by people, which is the most bizarre thing. You don't even know, and in fact don't know you. But the lack of likes on a platform can have catastrophic mental illness related effects on young people. And we see that happening for boys and girls, men and women. And of course, I don't think people like us are immune to it either, because let's say, after all, these systems have been developed with behavioral science in mind. I mean, the dopamine hits that we get. Of course, why are we on our mobile phones constantly ticking and pressing buttons? Because I'm addicted to, maybe on LinkedIn, not on TikTok, right? And so this is a very dangerous world that we all operate in. The metaverse is something that is even more worrying, because now you're asking us to go into this wormhole of another world within a world within a world with, intangibles. And that becomes our identity, moving forward. That is one of the technologies that I feel very worried about, as much as you can create a lot of fanfare and excitement around it. The leadership role then, therefore, you have, going back into your work, like wearing a CEO hat now, you say you have 20,000 people. I mean, how do you deal with this? Because, look, frankly, you have all sorts of people working in your organization. I mean, you have 20,000, that's a lot of people. And I assume a lot of people are working in India, some in the States, different parts of the world, right? How do you, so knowing what you know, what are the ways to combat this, if at all? I mean, you could say, I don't have the answer, but what are you doing as a leader to try and manage the situation?
So what I'm doing, Af, is not to be prescriptive. This is a game of not saying do this, do that. It doesn't work. I mean, I have people working in Philippines across, different cities in Philippines, in India, in Bulgaria, in London, in Mexico, in Honduras, and in America. It's a pretty diverse workforce. But what works is storytelling, vulnerability. So what I do is I talk to people about my stories. I talk to people about all the mistakes I believe I've made. I talk to people about everything that gives me joy. I talk to people. So what happens through the storytelling medium, you're not being prescriptive, but there is a basis of how people can identify with situations that they go through. Now, if I have 20,000 people who have 5 stories to tell, it's 100,000 stories. That's 100,000 learnings, or at least 50,000 learnings out there, which people can. So what people should know, that they are not alone. People should know that they are not the only ones going through it. And when they have the sense that, how did somebody go through it? What did they deal? It's like free psychiatry, right? You're not paying somebody to go and get advice, but you're learning from somebody's stories as to how they dealt with the situation and how they solved it. So for me, storytelling, life is storytelling. Life is about how we identify as people across borders, across cultures. At the end of the day, the feelings and emotions, when I told you in an organization, it's the same. Human beings are governed by a lot of fear, uncertainty, doubt, yet they want to further their life. They want to be ambitious. They want to go. And so you bring the ecosystem of what is innate and what they want to be. There's always a conflict, disappointments happen. But as long as you have a safety net, you have a community within the organization through communicate all the time. I'm hoping it makes an impact. I can't solve for everybody's problems, but if I can at least ensure that the organization is stable, people want to show up for work, people don't drag themselves out of bed to show up to work, I think I've done it well. And the validation for me is certifications on great places to work. Or so how do I connect? I mean, I can have an employee satisfaction survey, I can have all that, but what people tell outside, what people put out on the social media posts as to what they're belonging to the company, is a validation whether it's working.
Yeah, bang on. Okay, so storytelling, flexibility, being dynamic as opposed to being prescriptive. And I think one of the most important things, storytelling, of course, is age old and so powerful, actually part of cultures as well. If you look at many ancient civilizations and cultures, right? If you look at India, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, filled with stories after stories and stories within stories. And of course, human beings actually are quite simple, regardless of which part of the world you're in. We all get captivated by stories. My little boy, the 2-year-old boy, and my little daughter, that's all I do with them. In fact, nothing is rational with them. We just keep telling stories, and stories are so powerful, and they don't go away in terms of their impact and value when you get older. We forget. We think it's fine for a child, the storybook after storybook. In fact, the older you get, I think the more stories one should tell, because we start to detach ourselves from what it means to be human. And storytelling is the most powerful gift that human beings have got, especially when we now talk about AI and generative AI and the dominance of AI, which everyone's worried about. I always say the human aspect, what makes you human? Love, compassion, empathy, vulnerability, all of those things that you've just talked about. The second point you made was very important, vulnerability. I want to ask you this because I've spoken to many leaders. And when you cut through all the crap, basically, and you sit down and have a bottle of wine with them or whatever it may be, then it all starts to come out. And one of the things I've seen leaders tell me honestly and openly, which I'm sure you will, is that being vulnerable is not easy. Okay. So it's easy to say, hey, be vulnerable, John, Af, you should be vulnerable. But of course, and this is brilliant. There's a CEO of a FTSE company who will remain nameless. I was having lunch with him and he said something interesting to me. He said, Af, one of the things that winds me up, so upsets me. I said, yes, go on. He says it's when the media and people around you expect a CEO to wake up every morning, come to work and just be empathetic and just be compassionate and just be inspiring. It's almost like you think I'm AI. I'm not human. You've forgotten that I'm human. And then he threw a curveball, and I'm touching on this deliberately, where he said, and you forget that maybe at home, I do come from a home, I don't have the ability to be vulnerable. I don't have the ability to be compassionate. I don't get compassion. And so, he said, stop judging leaders like we are AI. It was a very interesting perspective. I said, that's a fair point, man, because you're only one guy or gal, and all the pressure is on you in this whatever structure we've created, be it a pyramid. So how do you get your managers and your leaders to be vulnerable? I don't mean it's not a switch, obviously, but how have you done it in the past?
No, so the first thing I've done is I've told these guys exactly what you said. I said, I'm far from perfect. I'm imperfect. And, and I tell them, be it with my kids, every Saturday evening when we're having our dinner, it's storytelling. I tell them all the screw-ups I've made in life, make it humorous, but there's a life lesson in there.
Yeah.
It's okay to make the mistake because I've made it. You don't have to feel bad about it, but this is how I dealt with it, or this is going to be a mistake. Don't make the mistake. So, but it's in a goofy environment. So then they relate to when they go through the situation. At work, I keep telling people, listen, if you're going to be doing everything at work that I'm going to be telling you that you need to do, the company is only as good as I am, and it's going to end up in mediocrity. At the end of it's going to end up mediocre. But 20,000 of you are going to tell me what's happening in your lives and how you're relating to your customers and solving their problems, and that's what drives innovation. We're going to be an amazing company. Now, for you to open up and talk to me, I'm going to tell you what I did 30 years back. When 30 years back, culturally, it was a hierarchical leadership.
Correct.
People used to tell you what you're supposed to do, and ideas were stifled. And how did we break those glass ceilings? How did women break those glass ceilings? How did juniors, became superior to the seniors because they went to other organizations and then they held better titles? And then organizations who said, hey, we shouldn't have let this person go. So there's a whole bunch. I mean, there's not one way of how you solve for this, but a level of transparency, honesty, a level of not reading out from a playbook, and ensuring and showing people that, hey, I have screwed up a lot and I have scars to show. Where I have got to in life is because I have surrounded myself with smart people, and those people have helped me succeed. So if all of us have to succeed, it is servant leadership. I stand behind you. I don't stand ahead of you. And I'm here to support you. You're not here to support me. And if I have to support you all the time, the game is over. We will not create value for our shareholders. We will not create value for our customers.
Beautiful. There's something that reminds me, I'm going to touch on this, and I've interviewed numerous people, and I find that coming from a dual background, or being bilingual or trilingual or quadlingual, or coming from another culture, and maybe I'm biased, right? This is unconscious bias, so if that's fine, disclaimer. I feel that gives a a special advantage, an unfair advantage, I would even say. I'm not going to be diplomatic about it, to people who understand different mindsets and different cultures. And I say this because I always weave in some of my interviews. I had a wonderful interview with Desh Deshpande, who I'm sure you've heard of. He's a bit of a legend in the industry and runs something called Deshpande Foundation. And I had the privilege of spending a lot of time with him. And his leadership principles are very, very simple. I mean, they're almost so simple that I haven't got it here, but a tiny book. It's about this big, about 60 pages and this small. And you can literally skim through it in 20 minutes. And that is it. He sums it all up in those 20 minutes, not a 500-page book, which he could, of course. And when I listen to you, and I've spoken to many leaders from different backgrounds, not just Asian, Indian backgrounds, other backgrounds too, I find that ability to transpose, to transcendent into another realm, being able to relate to another type of mindset. And they're very, very important nuances. It could be the dynamic of the way you speak. It's the story you use. It's the attitude. It's the pacing. It's the patience. It's the simplicity of what you say. I think you have then therefore the ability to relate to more. It's a little bit like, thinking of a neural network. You're able to connect to many, many more at different levels. Have you found, and I'm of course jumping the gun, I certainly feel that I've seen the difference between leaders who are of multicultural backgrounds and those who are not. I can see it straight away. How much has your Indian background, given that you've worked for all sorts of companies, assisted you? And where I'm going with this is, of course, your family background, your mom, your story, your personal story. I get that. Your relationship with, the culture, with spirituality. I'd be keen to understand that side of you, because when you make these statements for leaders who don't come from your background, maybe they don't get it. Maybe they're like, well, it's easy for him to say. He's been around for 30 years, made all the mistakes. Now he's, giving us wisdom. But I do think that your background has something to do with it. I may be wrong, but tell me how your Indianness has given you an unfair advantage.
I don't think I've never thought of it on that vector. I have to be very honest with you. What I use is ultimately it's people everywhere, and you're solving for a problem. I mean, different people have different, cultural nuances. Somebody would be high IQ, low EQ. Somebody would be high EQ, low IQ. The common thread is you need to connect with the lowest common multiple. I'll tell you some interesting stories. You learn more from the floor than you learn from the boardroom. So the days I used to be smoking, I used to go to the smoking area in the company I used to work, and I used to hear the chatter of all the kids out there. What are they talking? What are they buzzing on? What do they like about the company? What don't they like about the company? And a lot of them didn't know I was a CEO, because that again was a pretty large organization. Blending in there and understanding what they want, what is the chatter, and chatting up with, if you think somebody is going and saying something which is not, it reflects that they just chatting and having a very easy conversation without hierarchies, without divulging who you are. And so connecting with that lowest common multiple, and that is true across geographies. In some geographies, people don't care whether you're the CEO or chairman. They're there, to make a paycheck, and in some places it's a career they want to make, so they behave differently. But at the end of the day, connecting with the lowest common multiple, and being the same human being, whether it is to the chairman of the board or to the shareholder or to the regulator or to the lowest common multiple, that equanimity, I think, do some cultures teach you that better than others? I don't know. I'm not a good judge of it, but this is what has worked for me.
Beautiful. Okay, good. Fair enough. And that's a fair point, where you're saying that you haven't looked at that vector before, but hey, I planted the seed anyway, so you can think about it at some point. Let's move on a little bit as we come towards the sort of the later half of the show. I wanted to get your viewpoints on a topic that is close to my heart, which is being discussed quite a lot, which is around diversity and inclusion. And it's phenomenal because all around the world, I feel diversity and inclusion has its different global faces. It's done differently in East versus West, even in the East, and there are many other manifestations of D&I based on which part of the East. And there are sort of 6 communities that I tend to talk a lot about, one of which is, of course, gender, race, then LGBTQ+, neuro and cognodiverse. Neurodiversity is now becoming more of an issue that we're becoming aware of. And realizing, some people are realizing, I'm actually neurodiverse. I didn't realize. No wonder I behave the way I behave, right? Phenomenal. And people with physical constraints, unfortunately, they need a voice, they need a say, they need to be recognized. Multi-generational age, I call it age and multi-generational, that dynamic. And all of these factors that sort of come together in these diverse communities tells us that in the workforce, you have all sorts of people from all sorts of backgrounds. And these are just the 5 or 6 core diverse communities. So as a leader, we've been studying this, trying to figure out who's doing what, where, how. And without being cynical about it, I mean, there are some organizations that are doing a great job and that take this seriously, and they've got a D&I officer, they've got an HR officer. That doesn't mean they're doing D&I, but unfortunately for some it does. And many people are going down the path of just being a tick box exercise based on the SDG goals or the various agreements and accords that have been sort of laid out. How do you have a fast growing business, it's a technology company, and we're going to come to that nearing the end of the show now. So how do you look at diversity and inclusion? I've seen many of your posts on LinkedIn, of course, I've been spying, and I noticed that it's clear that you have a huge focus on D&I. You've from your posts, women's gender parity, equal pay, and other communities that you've represented. So it's clear as a leader that this matters to you, and I see that in your tone. Firstly, tell us what you're doing about it. Why does it matter, and what are you doing about it? And then I have 1 or 2 other questions around, leadership in the future around D&I. So why does it matter what you're doing about it?
Absolutely. So again, the D&I, ESG, these are all, concepts which have existed in many forms historically. So for me, the only principle I use is meritocracy. All I'm saying is people who are deserving for the job should get the job. And somebody who deserves the job if for example, if 100% of my organization was all male and 30% could have been replaced by women or by different orientation of people who are more capable than that one gender, I think the organization has done a disservice for its customers and shareholders. So for me, it's the right person for the job, and if it allows me to correct a skew, which it should not be, and I will do it because it's important. And then the example I give is very simple. Why has this become an issue today goes back to our history when Henry Ford says that, as long as the car is black, it's fine. It's one way of looking at it. So you had one assembly line, one set of components, one paint shop, and one type of car that came on. Today you see around you. Today you see the number of cars, models, designs, the engine, horsepower, color, shades, finishes. You think one type of people would be able to produce that many? The homogeneity in a workforce doesn't work. And that comes back to meritocracy. You need people from very different thinking, very different orientation, very different cultures, ethnicity, whatever it is. Today, you call it D&I, you call it ESG, but it is for the good and the health of the company and the environment and the community you're in. So for me, that's the filter that I use, saying that, hey, if I don't get an alternate point of view, if I don't get a point of view from a different perspective, we are going to cap out, we are going to top out at some point in time, and somebody's going to eat our lunch. So having conflicts, having issue-based conflicts, having different points of view, having these debates, and then solving for the problem and aligning people towards that common goal, for me, D&I helps me solve that larger problem.
Love it. I love the way you describe that, actually, and I like the Ford example, because it's the total opposite of that, the other end of the spectrum. And I guess this is the world we live in, with the choices and the preferences and the type of customer base that is changing rapidly. And of course, the customers are more informed than even the service providers or the product providers these days, because they know so much more. And that's the advantage of having information. I
mean, you and I can exchange so many notes because we get exposure peer to peer that the manufacturer or the service provider might not know.
Correct.
And so then the question is, how, if they have only one type of a workforce, they will never know what is out there. All I'm saying is all these things which are now, which have been mandated, is not because it's a tick box in a board approved in an SEC requirement, but what is good for the company, for the health of the company and its success.
Yeah, beautiful. Nicely put, nicely succinct, and I love it. Finally, tell us about what you're doing right now. So ResultsCX, what is this company about? Firstly, why did you take the gig, if you don't mind me asking? And because there's got to be a reason for it, of course, at this stage of your career. And what is so special about this organization that feels good to you, you feel excited about?
Yeah, no, I honestly, why I took the gig was, as I said, I like disrupting my life. I hate to be in a comfort zone.
Yeah.
Whatever, people who are half my age usually will take the risk of moving geographies and doing stuff. But I decided to do it because I said, if I don't do it now, I'll never do it. And I'll always be in my comfort zone. I had a great set of investors. We acquired a great company. It was a little bit of a lifestyle company. It was doing well, but it was a very nice, happy place, but it wasn't living up to its full potential. What this company could achieve with the core assets it had in terms of people, the relationship people had amongst themselves, with the clients, and the kind of work we were doing, I think the picture we could paint with this is more significant than what it was being represented. So we said, let's buy it and let's tell our story. And and we are not doing a bait and switch. It's not that we're saying something which we're not doing. We're doing so many things that are so impactful that it should come out and it should enable us to solve for our clients' problems and create value for our shareholders. So we saw all this. We said, let me jump into the deep end. And I always love jumping into the deep end of the pool and then swimming to the shallow end. And I said, let me do it. At this stage in life, my kids are, in senior school, heading to college. So they're not in that disruptive age where I'm doing something that is completely going to upset and pull the car, wheels of the car. And for all this thing, you need a very strong partner.
Yeah.
What my wife has sacrificed through all my ambitious years of doing whatever I do to fuel my ambition. If you don't have that support at home, I jokingly tell people, all my life I've been a traveling salesman. I've been doing all kinds of things, but I get home before my kids call me uncle. So it's the wife that's being taken the brunt of managing it.
Yeah.
And, so I think, all the constituents came together and I said, let's do it.
Right. And tell very quickly, what is it that you're doing here? What is the problem you're solving? What's the disruption you're creating?
So we are basically customer journeys. Earlier, we have a CX platform that works across healthcare payers, consumer tech, banks, retail companies, e-commerce companies. We are basically driving a lot more insights into customer journeys. So I'm trying to achieve three things very simply. I'm trying to help my customers retain their customers better. I'm trying, because retaining customers is cheaper than acquiring new customers and trying to grow with them. I'm helping them sell a little more into them. So you retain them so that they're not just stagnant, but you're increasing your footprint. And while achieving both, I try and reduce the cost to serve. And this is simply, I'm putting it in very simplistic terms. There's a lot of effort, terabytes of work that happens behind. But achieving these three drives efficiency. Now, whether I use Chat GPT for certain lines of work, whether I use different chatbots, ultimately, I'm trying to improve the customer experience that happens because I'm improving the work life of the person that's solving for it, giving them enough time to go through coaching, to giving enough time to learn new nuances. And this digital ecosystem, which is in place, enables my employees to spend that time required in themselves. Just a simple example. If somebody comes in to work for 9 hours, if they're working 8 hours for 1 hour for break, they're going to burn out. But digital AI with an ecosystem internally, if that 8 hours becomes 7 hours, but I get paid for 8 hours because I'm driving the outcome. It's not that I'm shooting myself by reducing my revenues, but if I am billing for 8 hours, but my employee is working for 7 hours because a chatbot has automated a whole bunch of things that they've been spending time on, it just reduces attrition, improves promoter score, which is a surrogate for churn. And then my client says, who are these guys who are doing well for me? I'd like to, give them a little more work. And that's how in this play. Everybody talks big name, transformation, digital transformation, automation, at the end of the day, without all the words you said, empathy, love, feeling, contextual understanding, it's a human being across the fence that's able to solve.
And so you believe that's fantastic. And so I guess what you're saying, your thesis is very clear that AI and advanced technologies are important because they help you save time, money, productivity, allow you to do other things, even if it's resting and chilling out and staring at the ceiling or doing some meditation for an hour, that would be amazing, really, if you think of human productivity and fulfillment. So they are there to make our lives easier. Technology is there to make our lives easier. You're not saying that the AI needs to replace 60% of what the human is doing because, well, there's more margin, it's more profit for me. You're clear that it's just an enabler and it's not a replacer.
It's not a replacer, because if it becomes very simple, is the world static? 10 years back, the way you consumed your services from your bank, telco, your cable provider, is it the same today? It's not. AI cannot predict what the next generation of services is going to come, because sometimes what happens, just a contextual understanding. Hey, Mr. Okay, I won't take names because it's too risky for me. Hey, airline company, thanks for a wonderful experience. I landed up in San Diego while my bags landed up in LA. So the response is, we're glad, Mr. John, you enjoyed the experience. So do you see what happens to AI when they don't get the context? I'm just dumping it down. You take these nuances for more complex, mission critical, regulatory driven, regulatory sensitive, legal sensitive industries. You see how this becomes, it becomes a lot more complex. So without human supervision and intervention, both in partnership with the right balance, for some dumbed down questions could be 80% AI, 20% human. But for a lot of the more complex world we're living in, AI will coexist, subset with human expertise.
Yeah, got it. Understood. So that's fantastic. And where can people find more on ResultsCX, and on what is the website that people can go on? There are loads of executives who watch us as well, by the way.
Yep. So we are www.results-cx.com. The website is slightly old. It's now we are completely rehashing it. So I'll urge you to take a look at it, but come back in 3 months and you will see a very different look and feel of our company. Okay, excellent. And you're based in Fort Lauderdale in the US? No, I'm based out of Jersey City right now. So while our company is headquartered out of Fort Lauderdale, I operate out of the northern side of the Eastern Seaboard. Okay. My final, brilliant. Thank you. And we will absolutely publicize that. My final question, last two questions, and we close off, is the first one. You just walked into a room and through some form of a miracle, your 16-year-old version walks in at the same time, right now, just that door opens up, and you've got 3 minutes or less than that with that person. What are you going to say to them? I'm sorry, I missed the question. Okay, so you're sitting where you're sitting right now, and so the door opens, and a 16-year-old version of you, the young version of you, walks in just for a few minutes, and you have an opportunity to share whatever, your wisdom, your knowledge. Try and picture yourself in that mode. What would you say to the younger version of you now? I have a great life. I don't change anything about yourself. Just be the person you are and enjoy the ride. Let there be mystery. Where there's mystery, there is going to be profitability. Just remember that. Where there's mystery, there's going to be profitability and prosperity. Okay, great. Wonderful. That's lovely to hear. And my last one, how did you find the experience today, Rajesh? Just a few seconds on Straight Talk.
with me. How was the experience? Some words to make us work
No,
hard.
absolutely. You kept it very easy, and I really enjoyed it because you've asked me questions which nobody's done it. I mean, nobody's done this. People ask me about company performance numbers. It's always that, and you've brought out certain nuances, some answers that were not prepared. It's just come out from the heart, and I hope it made sense.
Oh, yeah.
I really enjoyed this interaction because, hey, I didn't feel that you spent an hour and a half, and when you don't see time fly by, it's time well spent.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. I had an equally, enthralling time. There are a lot of very important lessons you will probably not realize because you said them, but we'll bring them back to you, and nice snippets and nice quotes that are part of your life. And we don't sometimes realize, when someone asks you a question, that's when you're digging much deeper and thinking, on hindsight, that is my life. That is how I define my life. And which is why it's such a privilege for me to have people like you on the show, because it's an incredible learning exercise. And like you said earlier, you're a student of life. And thank you so much for coming on my show. It's been a real pleasure to reconnect with you. And we wish you all the best in your new journey with ResultsCX and everything else that you're doing. No doubt we will be in touch. And for our listeners, click on the bottom right there, subscribe button. You can watch this episode of Rajesh and various other episodes that we have on the show. So with that in mind, thank you so much. I'm going to sign off. I'm Af Malhotra. Real pleasure seeing you, Rajesh. Thank you so much, Rajesh Subramaniam, CEO of ResultsCX. Be well. Take care, and I look forward to seeing you very soon.
Thanks, Af. Thanks. I really enjoyed the session. Thanks, Denise, for setting it up. Cheers. Bye.
Thank you.